talk about that tipping point.
Yeah, after about 100 interrogations, I had an interrogation with a 22-year-old Saudi Arabian. He it was a self-declared jihadi, and he had come to Iraq specifically for those purposes. His either his brother or his cousin had died in Iraq, and he came to fill the shoes of the family member. And he had been interrogated 12 or so times before, and so I was able to read up quite a bit on him before our first interrogation, so I knew a lot about him. And when we finally went into the interrogation, I went through the questions of how he'd been arrested, where he'd been arrested, how he gained access into Iraq, and so forth. But very quickly, our conversation went in a religious and philosophical direction. And I asked him why he came to Iraq to kill. And then he asked me why I came to Iraq to kill. And I said, I didn't come here to kill. I came because it's my duty. And he said, more or less, throughout the conversation, that he came for the same reasons, which was simply that a family member had died, and as the next eldest male in his family, it was his duty to fill those shoes, that it was his duty. And I started asking him about jihad and his understanding of jihad, and the way he expressed his understanding of jihad was milder than what I've heard from many pulpits, which was simply foreign army invades Muslim lands. It's the duty of the Muslim to expel foreign army. That's it. And he then went on to tell me that he pitied me because if it were the will of God for him to spend his entire life in prison, he would accept that as the will of God. And he didn't think that I had the kind of peace in my life that would allow me to accept the same sort of fate, were that God's will for my life. And I kind of chuckled, and partly because I remembered that growing up as an evangelical, how many times I'd said the exact same thing to people that I was trying to convert, that they don't have the kind of peace that I have, and that I wanted them to be able to experience the kind of peace that comes with knowing God. And here I was spending time in an interrogation with a Muslim young man who was basically my mirror, and he was trying to convert me. And we went on to talk about more about the cycle of vengeance, and I asked him, wouldn't it be amazing if one day we found ourselves outside of this prison, and I was no longer a soldier and you were no longer imprisoned, and we were able to sit down and have tea, and I knew that I couldn't try to counter his argument about where I was spiritually in my life, or who had the greater just cause, because I wasn't living the kind of life that could sustain that sort of argument. It would just be an abstraction, because I was wearing a uniform and I was fighting for the force that had invaded the country that he and his family felt it was their duty to defend from. And that if I took seriously the arguments that it was the freedom of Christ that ultimately sets the captives free, and that it's, I'd started to argue a little bit about the differences between the teachings of Christ and the teachings of Muhammad with him, because he said that Jesus was an honorable man and a prophet who taught peace, but he didn't have the full revelation which came with Muhammad, and Muhammad also taught retribution. And I said to him, how's that working for us? It's got two people who are virtually the same, just from two different religions, sitting in a room as enemies. Whereas if we'd met anywhere else, we probably could sit down and have that cup of tea together. And I wanted to press him on that, but I knew I had no sort of moral authority to do that, because I wasn't living the Christian witness that I wanted to use as the argument against him. That if I wanted to use that argument, I would have to change my life.
Okay.
And I stopped the interrogation, and I went to my superior, and I said, I can't go back in that room. I can't interrogate him anymore. If I go back in that room, I'm going to see a young man who's looking for answers, and I'm no different than he is. I'm a young man looking for answers, and I'm going to want to talk to him as a human, as a person, and I'm not going to talk to him about the tactical reasons for which they would want me in there. And I wrote all of this in a report as well, and when my superior read the report, he came to me and he said, "This is a very strange report that I've just read." And I said, "It is, and I'm in a very strange situation." And I didn't tell him immediately that I was going to apply for conscientious objector status, but that's exactly what I knew I had to do when that interrogation finished. And I waited a couple of days I was actually very, very lucky, because immediately after that interrogation, it was my turn to go on R&R. And so I was given 4 days in Cotter to read all of the Stanley Hauerwas books that I had left at home, but promptly bought on Amazon to have them shipped to me at Abu Ghraib. And I had bought like Aristotle's Nicomachean Ethics, and the writings of Dorothy Day and St. Francis, and all of these individuals that Thomas Merton, that I felt had answers to the questions that I was asking. And so I spent that 4 days in a lot of prayer, meditation, and reading. My decision to leave the military was not about me. It was about obedience to a higher authority.